In this episode of Restore It, we're going to continue repairing the E30 chassis in preparation for the new panels. I'm going to repair more of the inner sill panel and make a start on the rear left outer arch. Because I'm in the middle of organising the new workshop and all of the new tools, I'm not getting a lot of time to make progress on the project right at this moment. So the progress in these episodes might seem slow, and that's because it is. But as soon as the 3-phase gets turned on and the new compressor, spray booth and blasting cabinet are in, and the rest of the workshop is properly set up, I'll be able to spend all of my time making content with it. So as you can see, the rear section of this inner sill has been absolutely destroyed by rust and being separated from the outer sill. I'm going to start by removing the undersill and making the outer piece that will sit on top of the other. As you can see here, this piece will slightly overlap the one to its right. We're starting with the simple stuff here, but with the new piece made, I can use it to mark the line and then cut it out. But before I crack on with that, I just want to tell you about the sponsor of this episode, Factor. When you sign up with Factor, you'll get fresh, ready-made meals delivered straight to your doorstep. Their chef-created meals are always fresh, never frozen, and designed by dietitians to ensure every meal is packed with premium, science-backed nutritional quality. How does no prep and no mess sound? Well, Factor's meals arrive pre-prepared and ready to eat in 2 minutes or less, so it's even faster than ordering in. Their meal plans offer variety with a rotating weekly menu of 27 plus meal options and 33 plus add-ons like smoothies, keto shakes, desserts and more. Factor offers the most convenient way to eat well whilst eating right. With meal preference options like keto, calorie smart, vegan and vegetarian each week, there's something for everyone. Meal plans range from 4 to 18 meals per week, and you can easily add or reduce the number depending on your specific needs. You can also easily modify food preferences and skip a week if needed. Choose your favourite meals or let them craft your order based on your taste preferences and meal history. Factor helps you avoid fast food and ordering in, with no-nonsense delicious food that's ready quickly, be it breakfast, lunch or dinner. Factor's chef-prepared meals take the guesswork out of eating well, so you never have to opt for something that isn't good for you. They offer seafood, veggie and meat options along with keto, calorie smart, chef favourites, vegan and vegetarian. To get involved, use my link or go to go.factor75.com and use code POGRESTOREJAN60 for 60% off your first box. That's POG RESTOREJAN60 for 60% off your first box. Thanks to Factor for supporting the channel. Let's get back to the E30. During the removal of this piece, I had to be careful not to cut through whatever is behind this panel. This last piece was held on with spot welds, which had to be ground down. Once it was all off, I cleaned up the undersill and protected the surface that's going to sit underneath the new piece with primer. I also added bodywork primer to the rear side of the new piece as well. So now that this piece is done and ready to go on, I can move on to the second piece that needs to be made and welded in first. Because there's quite a lot of damage and rust on this section, I'm going to make one big piece out of 3 smaller pieces that I'm going to weld together off of the car. I skipped out all of the cutting and bending as it just takes ages, but these are the 3 pieces I'm going to weld together to replace this whole section. I'm doing this over the original metal to make the new piece conform to the old piece as best as possible. I'm using the handle of a hammer to force the pieces together and then tack them in place. I can now remove it and weld it together on both sides away from the car. The welds can now be ground down on the outside, but I'm going to leave the welds as they are on the inside, so that the piece is as strong and as thick as it can be, and also because it's going to be covered in undersill, you'll never see the inside of it even if you were to go looking. Before I make the cut, I reattach the piece so I can make a few final adjustments and remark the line just in case the adjustments or welding made any changes to it. With that done, I can now cut out the rust and damage. Again, I had to be careful not to cut through to the bracket that was spot welded to the other side. With that gone, I nervously tested the piece and realised I did in fact cut through to the bracket, so I think I'll be needing a new one of those. Before I could weld in the new piece, I had to remove some of the undersill around the cut on both sides of the panel. As I mentioned before, all of this undersill is going to be removed in one go in a coming episode. I saw a lot of you guessing dry ice, and I've always thought dry ice isn't powerful enough to remove undersill, just to clean it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I can tell you that it's not the method I'm going with. I think the way it's going to be done is way cooler than ice blasting, so guess again with that in mind. I tried mounting the new piece with magnets and then vice grips, but I just couldn't get it to stay where I wanted it to. So in the end, I held it in place for the first tack and then moved it to where I needed it to be for the rest. This actually worked out better than I thought it was going to, and it's now ready to be welded in fully. With that done, I can now carefully grind the welds flush on this side. I'm really happy with how this one turned out. The penetration is worlds apart from where my welds used to be, and I'm finally starting to get the hang of basic fabricating. This bracket is definitely on its last legs and needs replacing anyway, thankfully. I just hope I can get one from somewhere. If not, I'll have a go of making my own. The rear side of these welds need little to no prep, but I'm going to take off any high spots and make sure there aren't any pinholes along the join. There was actually only one, and with that dealt with, I can protect the rear side and call this rear section finished. I do need to drill 2 holes along the bottom section, but I'll do that once the new panels are on, so everything is aligned. One thing that was making progress even slower was the compressor. I found out that the problem was with the non-return valve or check valve. When it fails, it lets air leak out from underneath the pressure switch, which is also broken. This means I can only get about 90 psi max, which is the required running psi for most air tools. I am going to fix this compressor, but as mentioned in a previous episode, it will soon be replaced by a much superior machine. So getting back to the inner sill, I can now weld in the outer piece that I made earlier. Thankfully, this piece is very straightforward and only needs 2 sides welding. I learned a really valuable lesson whilst welding this piece. The placement of the ground makes so much more difference to the welds than I first thought. These are some step welds done with the earth clamp right next to the gun, whereas the ones on the left were done with the clamp on the other side of the piece and don't look anywhere near as good. So in the future I'm going to try and weld as close as I can to the earth clamp. I just love how this bodywork primer dries matte. It makes seeing everything and working on it so much easier. With the outer piece in, I can now grind down the welds and reshape the bottom of it so that it aligns with the rest of the sill. There were a few areas that I felt needed to be filled in. Not pinholes, but the edge of welds that leave the surface uneven after grinding. This might be going too far, maybe it's not. You tell me what you think. To trim the bottom, I measured the overlap on each end and drew a line across it, making sure it was in line with the rest of the sill. And to finish it off, I added the angle back to the corner of this piece to match the rest of them. I can now clean it with silicone remover and protect it with bodywork primer. The same then went for the rear side of the sill. Again, there isn't much to do with the welds, just check for pinholes and protect the bare metal. So that's 3/4 of the bottom lip of this left inner sill done. The plan now was to move on to the front section to complete the entire bottom of the left inner sill. This final section is covered by what's left over of the original outer sill panel, and it's right next to one of my first ever welds, something I want to completely cut out and replace. Whilst we look at these old welds, I just want everyone to keep in mind the great progress I've made and to soon forget these old ones ever existed. So I thought whilst I'm here, I might as well remove the undercoating and have a good look. So at this point, I changed the plan to come back to these footwell sections and front sill sections once I've got more sheet metal in and some new panels as well. I might be getting new floor pans and firewall pieces to replace these sections, but I also might make them myself, I'm not sure yet. So whilst I decide what I'm going to do there and wait for some more sheet metal to arrive, I'm going to move to the rear of the car and to a panel I already have from E30 Garage Norway. This panel is a great example of what my welding experience has been like so far. I want to replace this piece with the new one, and so I start removing the undersill to see where the spot welds are. And not long into it, I realise that to replace this piece, I first need to repair the piece that this piece attaches to. And to repair that piece, I really need to repair or remove the outer wheel arch first. This, thankfully, is not my work. This has been on the car since I bought it about 8 years ago. So this bodge job could be 20 years old for all I know. I was confused as to why I could only see the spot welds holding this jack bracket on from one side, and then soon realised that it's a lap weld that goes over both the inner and outer wheel arch, with a few other pieces to roughly make up the shape of the arch. So the plan is changing again, and I've come to realise it's time to remove the outer arches, starting with these old lap welds. So now we can really see what they've done. It's quite a big piece for the damage that's there, but each to their own I guess. I'm going to remove any sign of this repair and butt weld the inner arch once the outer arch is off, and then I can come back to this piece. Thankfully, BMW still stock these outer wheel arches, so it will be a straight swap on both sides. I don't think repairing this panel would have been a good idea. It's so battered I think it would have been more work than it's worth, and that's coming from me. To remove it, I opted for the belt sander, but I've recently been told to try a thick cutting disc on an air grinder which might be quicker. So I won't show you the whole thing as this took way longer than it should, especially with the compressor not performing as it should. After marking all of the spot welds, I started to grind them down, making sure not to touch the panel behind. And to make sure I didn't grind into the panel behind, I used the panel splitter to finish the spot welds off. I had to use a wire wheel on the grinder to remove the undersill that was sitting between the two arch panels. It was making it really hard for the panel splitter to get in and do its job. Slowly but surely, the outer arch lifted off the inner, and it really was slowly. I cannot wait for 50 CFM all of the time. I'm currently running 13 CFM, and with the leaks it's probably around 5 or something like that. Towards the end, I switched to a flap disc as the bottom section was too weak to take the panel splitter. With all of the spot welds broken, I could now remove the vice grips holding it on and free the panel from the chassis. I can now really see just how messed up this arch panel is. Definitely the right decision to straight up replace it with a new one, and thank BMW they still sell them. Without patting myself on the back too much here, I hardly touched the inner arch panel at all during that removal, which will be good for when the new one goes on. I'm going to try and find a proper spot welder to make life so much easier. The only problem is I have no idea where to get one without spending an arm and a leg, so any advice in the comments is appreciated. I can now make the repairs to this area, and once that's done, I'll do the panel from E30 Garage Norway and then the outer arch. There really isn't much left of this poor panel. It's definitely original, which makes it at least 36 years old, so when you think about it like that, it's not done too badly at all. So now I need to remove the leftover spot welds from the inner arch and protect it with primer for the time being. And there we go. That's all I had time to do this week, but like I said, I'll soon be able to squeeze a lot more into these E30 episodes alongside the antiques, and I'll be able to do both a lot more consistently. In the next E30 episode, I'm going to remove the driver's side outer arch, repair the top of the inner sills, repair the bottom of the passenger side inner arch, and maybe even spot weld some new panels on. I really do appreciate any advice on welding or fabricating, as I'm still just learning, so don't feel as if you're being a know-it-all or patronising me. I've genuinely learnt so much from reading the comments. So I hope that's been interesting, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.